Now, we've talked a lot about face actions, but let's talk some more about edge actions. To do that, let's go ahead and grab a cylinder 3D, go into Make Polymesh 3D. I'm going to hover over an edge. Let's choose bevel. So through here we can go through and we can bevel an edge. And actually the default is insert. So single edge loop insert chosen. You can go through here and you can click on an edge and it'll go through and insert an edge loop. And in fact, if you hold down Alt, that'll delete edge loops. So just like when we were choosing like face actions move, instead of doing that, just going to Q mesh and holding down Shift, instead of hovering over an edge and saying delete edge loop complete, just use insert single edge loop or multiple edge loops and then just hold down Alt. That way you don't have to switch to another function here like delete edge loop. So again, we can hold down Alt and we can get rid of edge loops here, and then we can just not hold down Alt and we can put in loops here, and then we can hold down Alt and get rid of this one, and that'll give us a bevel. Or alternatively, we can say again bevel edge loop complete, and it'll bevel all the way through. Now there's also, if we hover over an edge, insert, instead of single we have multiple. So through here we can insert multiple edge loops. We pull up and down, and just like we did before, we have an interactive elevation on this one. Now you can choose specified resolution and it'll cap out at 8. So as you go through here it'll just stop at 8 automatically. If you want interactive, just choose interactive, and then as you click and pull up and down it'll add more edge loops. And in fact, if we go through here you're going to see specified elevation is chosen and set to 0. If we want, we can choose interactive elevation. And what that's going to allow me to do is insert a multiple edge loops here, and then as I pull left and right, we can kind of bow this out, and then up and down, we'll choose our resolution. So very quickly we can pull in and add resolution, or pull out and add resolution, or get rid of resolution as needed. So back to the beveling, if we take this here and we say bevel edge loop complete, we can bevel this whole edge, or like we did before, we can say insert multiple edge loops, hold down Alt, and get rid of that bevel. However, when we go back in here and say insert multiple edge loops with interactive elevation, we can actually pull on this and then drag it out, and we can give that a nice bent curve profile through here. So you can kind of put a little fillet in there. Now you're going to see it also adds new and alternating polygroups. You can tell it, instead of alternating the polygroups, make it the same. So now when I go through here, it'll keep all of this the same polygroup. Or even if you want to maintain the same polygroup it had originally, just say keep polygroup. Now feel free to play with any of these options. I can't go through every single option in here and every single possible target and modifier. It would take too long. But now that you know the basics, you should feel pretty free to go through here and play around with these options, and you'll find pretty quickly what you tend to use a lot. For example, like what we did before, we can have bridge two holes or bridge edges. So if you hover over this face and we say Q mesh flat island, and then we hold down Control and pull out a version of that face there. And now we hover over this face and say delete flat island. Now we've got something we need to bridge. And we can use edge bridging for that. So we can hover over an edge, and we can say bridge edges. So if we want, we can hover over this edge, and it's going to say, okay, click the first edge, so I will. And then I'm going to go up here, and I'm just going to say, click the second edge, so I will. And now we can go through here, and we can bridge these two. Now you may notice like, oh, I accidentally hit a point, and it did something. If you ever want to turn off functionality so you don't accidentally hit something, you can hover over a face, say do nothing, hover over a point, say do nothing, and now just your edge actions will be recorded, and it might be a little bit easier to go through here. Also, if you're using a mouse, it might be a little bit easier to go through with your mouse instead of a tablet when I'm doing edge actions. Also, if you go down here to the very bottom and say display properties, you can turn on double, and it might make it a little bit easier to see, you know, this edge to this edge. Now, we haven't gotten there yet, but you can also turn on temporary non-destructive thickness. So if you go in here to dynamic subdiv and turn on dynamic, turn smooth subdiv down to 0, and then crank thickness up. So that way, we can go down here, turn off double, and now you can see both sides, and it'll give your edges a little bit of thickness, which may make it easier to select an edge and another edge. And when you don't want thickness anymore, just go back up here and turn off dynamic. We'll get heavier into dynamic in just a bit, but that's another option for you. Now, this is kind of tedious having to bridge every single edge. So what I'm going to do is hover over a face, I'll switch it back to Q Mesh instead of do nothing. I'm going to hold down Alt and paint over these. And in fact, let's switch back to delete a single poly, and let's delete all those. So if I hover over an edge now, hit spacebar or hold down spacebar and say bridge two holes, we have a hole on the back of this object and a hole on this object. So if I click this edge and this edge, it'll bridge these together for us. And in fact, I have interactive resolution set. So you can see interactive resolution is turned on. So that's why I'm able to do that. So that'll be a little bit quicker. Speaking of optimal curvature, let's go back to our previous object. Or if you didn't have one, we can just choose any polygroup object, go down here to initialize and say Q cube. And you know what, we'll set this back to the default of 2. So we have X symmetry turned on. I can hold down Alt and I can start painting here. We can say Q mesh, polygroup all, go ahead and pull these out a couple times. Paint in the back, pull these out a couple times. If I hover over a face and I say delete a single poly, I can hover over an edge and I can say bridge two holes. And I can click here and then bridge it, and that'll give me not only interactive height by going left to right, but also interactive resolution up and down. However, I can also go in here and say make it more circular, and then as I click here, it's going to try to maintain more of a circular profile. And in fact, I can say optimal curvature and optimal resolution. So now when I click here and click here, it'll automatically look at the distance and the parent edge length and go ahead and fill this in with a circular curve with the same amount of polygons here to make it compatible with the rest of your geometry. Pretty cool. Now, for close holes, we can grab a cylinder 3D, say make polymesh 3D, hover over a face, say delete flat island, and I'll go ahead and delete this. And now if we hover over an edge, we can say close. If we choose concave hole, it'll do the same thing as going in here to geometry, modify topology, close holes. And if that's the result you want, that's perfectly fine. However, if you choose convex hole, this will allow you a lot more options. For example, it'll close to a polarized cap, and if you keep dragging, it'll allow you not only to add resolution, but also curvature. So you can go through here and you can add some curvature to your object. And just like we did before, if you go down here and change a bunch of different options, but for the most part, what I'll usually do is just click and pull, give myself a rounded cap here, Control Shift Tap here to get both those polygroups, hit Control W, and now I'm good to go. Now let's say you wanted to take these polygroups right here, so I'm going to Alt paint these ones, and I accidentally grabbed that one, so I'm going to Alt paint that one to get rid of it. I'm going to say delete a single poly to get rid of all of them. I'm going to go in here to close convex hole, and I'm going to click and pull, and it does a bumpy dome, but let's say I wanted it to go inwards instead. That's where that flip, way down here at the very bottom of your entire tool menu down here, underneath display properties, there's a flip option. We already turned on double, and that'll allow you to see both sides of your object here. But if you flip your geometry, that's going to invert your surface normals. So now we can see, okay, there's the hole, and we're kind of looking through our object. What that's going to allow us to do is hover over an edge, close convex hole, and now when we pull, it'll go inwards. Perfect. However, I want my object to appear as normal. So I'm going to go back over here and hit flip, and now this goes inwards. I can hold down Control Shift, hit Control W, and now we have an inverted dome on our object. So now at this point, again, there's so many things you can do here. You can hover over a face, you can say Q mesh, polygroup all, hold down Control, pull out a copy of this, continue to Q mesh this. If you want to split this into its own subtool, you can. You can say hold down Control Shift, go to select rectangle and select it, and then do a subtool, split hidden. And another thing I like to do, I'm going to hold down Control Shift and bring everything else back. Sometimes what I'll do, if I don't know what my polygroups are like anywhere, I'll just hold down Control Shift and just grab just a few of those polygons from that non-vert welded object. And if you remember down here under Visibility, Grow All, the shortcut for that is Control Shift A. So if I go over here and do Control Shift A, that's going to grab the entire object that was vert welded together. If I hold down Control Shift and drag, it'll invert it, and you'll see we have these two objects separated by visibility now. And then it's just a simple matter of subtool, split, hidden, and now this is a separate subtool and this is a separate subtool. So we tap this one and hit W, go to Unmask Mesh Center, and now I can put this one right in here. I can scale it up if I need to. So now I have a separate object that fits right in there. Now if I come in here, and you're going to see collapse is another option, so we can do a collapse and edge. You can go through here and you can collapse single edges, which is useful for kind of changing direction or simplifying your object. You can also go through here and collapse a poly loop. So you can go through here and just collapse entire poly loops. And in fact, if I click that and pull down, it's going to collapse upwards, and if I click that and pull up, it's going to collapse downwards. Now let's say you wanted to collapse these to a center point along here. What you can do is insert multiple edge loops, and that'll allow you to put an edge ring right in the middle here, and then you can simply go in here to collapse poly loop and collapse that one up and this one down, and that'll collapse to the middle. And just like we did before, you can go in here and you can bevel, you can hover over face and say Q mesh, go in here and say insert multiple edge loops, pull and round it off, and get all sorts of modeling happening for whatever you need to do. We're going to come back to creasing when we get into dynamic subdivisions here. So we'll skip that for now, but under Edge Actions there's also delete, and instead of going through here and saying delete edge loop complete, usually what I'll do is keep this on insert single edge loop or multiple edge loops and hold down Alt. However, if you ever need to delete a single edge, for example, if I hover over a point and I say bridge 2 points, I can put an edge right along here. I can hover over an edge and then I can say delete single edge and just delete that edge. If I hover over an edge and hold down spacebar, you're going to see we have a lot of extrude options. Extrude comes in handy quite a bit. Let's go in here to Load Tools from Project, go to Program Files, Pixel Logic, ZBrush 2021, Z Projects, open up the Demo Anime Head. Let's go out of polyframe mode here. And we're going to skip a little bit. Let's go to B to open up our brush menu, T to open up all the brushes that start with a T, and then choose O. That's our topology brush. And very quickly, I'm just going to, we can turn off X symmetry. I'm just going to drag over my head, and it's going to leave a curve behind. And if I continue dragging edges here, it's going to leave parallel edges. And if I drag it this way, it's going to cross those with geometry. So you're going to see wherever I get an orange result is new geometry. And I'm not going to go too in depth on this brush right now. But what I'm going to do is take my draw size up here, pull that down to 1, and then use my mouse and tap on my object here. It's going to look like it all disappeared. However, if I go down here to split, unmask points, now I'm going to have my head geometry, and if I go in here to transparent, and we'll turn off ghost, you're going to see I have this head geometry. Let's go ahead and turn on polyframe, and we'll switch over here to Skin Shader 4. Now we have topology sitting right on our head. So if I go back into my ZModeler brush, BZM, I hover over an edge. We can now go here to Extrude Edge, and if I pull on this edge, it's just going to pull an edge. And it's also just going to pull this edge out into space if I want to. However, there is an option for Extrude Edge, and if it's free move, it won't snap the surface, but if you choose snap the surface, it'll go through and it'll now snap this edge to a surface here. In fact, if I keep pulling this edge out, it'll go ahead and snap to any other edges because we have Smart Attraction turned on. So you can see as I hover over this edge here, there's some targets in here, edge, edge loop, poly loop, etc. There's an alternative to that. So if you hover over an edge, you're going to see Shift will snap an angle, which we'll get to in a bit. Alt will extrude a poly loop, and then tapping Alt will switch to extruded edge loop position. So we can pull out, if we tap Alt once, we'll get this entire edge. If we tap Alt again, we'll go back to single. So here's single, here's an entire edge, and if you hold down Alt, it's going to do your entire edge border. That's a very quick way to kind of go through and kind of snap new geometry here. So here's an entire loop here. And if you ever have any problems with these things snapping together, you can switch over to point mode and say move by brush radius, snap to surface, attraction, and now when you use move, it'll actually snap points together. So you can use move and snap to surface, as well as extrude and snap to surface, and attract these together. So move will go here and snap these, and snap these. And you can even do triangles. So if I hover over a face, or hover over an edge and do extrude here, and we'll just tap Alt once so we pull out a single edge, I can grab this edge, and as I pull to the side here, I can actually snap this to a triangle. It's actually up, and you can snap this over, and it'll snap to a triangle. Same thing with this one. You can just continue snapping to triangles if you want. Or you can go through here, move, and then snap to a single point. Now, let's take this object here, and we'll go all the way back down. To initialize, we'll change these. You know what, we'll set these to 4, hit Tab, hit 4, 4, Enter, hit Q Grid. Let's go into solo mode. And now if we go through here, and we say hover over face, or hover over an edge, hold down spacebar, we'll keep edge loop. And here you're going to see we have some angles in here. So we've already talked about the different targets and how to switch between them with Alt. You can also tap Shift and switch between free, planar, and perpendicular. So as we go through here, and I'm pulling out an edge, you're going to see we have free angle. So this allows us to pull this edge in any direction that we want. However, we also have planar and perpendicular. Now instead of going through here and choosing those, I can go on the fly, I can tap Shift once, and you're going to see in the upper left-hand corner, switch to planar angle. So what that means is it's going to keep it on that exact same plane. So as I pull this edge off, it's going to keep it on that same flat plane. Now, like I mentioned before, if you want to see a little bit of thickness to this object while we're working on it, we can temporarily turn on thickness by going here to Dynamic, turning Smooth down to 0, and just adding a little bit of thickness here. So you can use this to kind of make it a little bit easier to pull out edges and see them a little bit better. So again, I can pull this edge and I'm free to put this edge wherever I want as long as it's on that flat plane, because we switch to planar by tapping Shift. If I tap Shift one more time, you're going to see I'm on perpendicular now. So now I'm free to put this wherever I want. However, it's going to be perpendicular to the parent curve. So as I pull these out, it's always going to be perpendicular to the previous edge. So let's go ahead and turn on Dynamic, smooth down to 0, a little bit of thickness again. And as we pull this out, we can tap Shift, so we can go free, planar, perpendicular. And you also have side control down here. So as I'm switching through these different options, I can go through here and say, I want to taper my sides. So as I pull this out and I tap Alt once, you're going to see those sides over there will taper, and I can tap Shift to keep it on that same plane. So as I put these in, it'll kind of taper inwards for me. Now, if I change this to extend, well, free sides, it's just going to pull these out and I can do whatever I want to my side edges there. However, if I go to extend sides, it's going to keep following the path of my parent angle. So as I keep going through here and extending, it's going to go extend, extend, extend all the way till it hits a point and then it does the entire border. However, if I change this to parallel sides, as I bring this out, it's going to take these edges here and keep them, again, we're still on planar, and it's going to keep them parallel. So you can very quickly choose, we can hold down Alt to pull this out and tap Shift to go perpendicular, and very quickly just grab edges here. Again, tapping Shift to change the perpendicular or planar, tapping Alt, or switching back to a single extruded edge. And again, if just like the previous functionality, if you just tap on one side, it'll maintain the same height and all the same previous settings. Most of these are going to be the exact same functionality as the face actions. For example, like if you want to move an edge, you can just click and you can move a single edge. Or like we did before, I can just go over here to Transpose, and I can transpose an edge, and that'll give me a gizmo control. Or I can say, and again I can just tap off to go back to the edge options, edge loop complete. Now I can transpose this entire edge, or poly loop, and then I can go here to Unmask Mesh Center, and then I can scale out with my transpose. Or if I want, I could even scale edge loop complete and just scale this entire edge loop at the same time. And that'll come in handy if we choose something like a cylinder, make polymesh 3D, You have an edge loop here, so we can scale edge loop complete, and we can literally just scale this in and up and down using the edge loop itself as a reference point. And then again, you can hover over this and say insert single edge loop, hold down Alt and get rid of that. Or even when we're in scale, if you just scale this edge loop complete and just, if you've already scaled these to a certain distance, you can just tap it and it'll scale it out to that exact distance there. And then you can go through here and say bevel, edge loop complete, that'll give you a new polygroup, hover over face, inset, polygroup all, region, and then you can say Q mesh, polygroup all, hold down shift and pull it along that surface normal. And again, just very quickly model whatever shape you need. This is another easy one too, hovering over an edge and saying like transpose. You can transpose a poly loop. So here you can click transpose, go to unmask mesh center. You can scale this in, tap off, do the exact same thing here, unmask mesh center, scale it out. So again, very quickly, you can use edge actions to again get that shape that you want.